Move. Get out the way. One of my closest friends told me, Salvador, when you retired, I was incredibly proud of you. I thought it was great, but I wasn't surprised. And I've been thinking about that statement for the last couple of years since I've been retired. And I want to take this opportunity today to unpack that for you, because I think a lot of us out there probably lose the race before we start because we create obstacles that impact our ability to get to where it is that we want to be, whether it's retirement or just in life. So, but before I get started, I just want to take an opportunity to introduce myself. I'm Sabado. And for those of you that have been rocking with me for a while, welcome back. And if you're new to the channel, welcome to the channel. This is a channel where I talk all things early retirement, and not necessarily trying to educate everybody on all things, because I'm not educated on all things, but I am educated on my story. And I share that with you, not necessarily in hopes that you retire early, because I don't expect everybody to retire early, but I do expect you to live your best life. And I think with the things we talk about on this channel, it'll put you in position to have the proper mindset. You'll be able to take anything that I give you, either ask me, or you can go back and review the primary source and have that conversation. Or you can ask me and I'll give you an answer. And I've always said that if I care about you enough to answer the question, it's always going to be the truth. And folks, I will always give you the truth. So on that note, let's go ahead and get started. First, I want to start with the facts. Most of you tell yourself what it is that you can't do before you even start. And when I look back at my upbringing and where I started, the fact is I went to a high school that had a 55% dropout rate, and I'm African American. So when you look at any statistics, the statistics are going to disproportionately impact people that look like me more than going to impact other people. I know there's going to be people that get upset with that, but like I said, it is what it is. And I had athletic injuries. I'm 6'8". One of these days I'll stand up on video and show you how tall I am, but I don't think it'll scale the way it needs to scale. But I thought I was going to play basketball. I thought I was going to be in the NBA, and I got hurt. And one of the things that was really important was that I didn't become a stereotype. And we'll talk about how I got to that place in the beginning, and I'm on my life around that. But the difference was, for me, compared to a lot of other people, is that, I listened to the experts that told me how to do things, not the naysayers and not the haters that were telling me what I couldn't do. And then I took the good info, and, even when I didn't have the courage to believe in myself. One short story I'll say that's kind of off script is I grew up in the east side of town, and on the east side of town, it's a disenfranchised neck of the woods. We had gangs, we had fights, we had drugs, we had all the things that you would expect in that part of town. And when I went to junior college after hurting my knee in high school, which was the first setback, I went to the other side of town. And it was the affluent part of town. It was this place that it wasn't like Los Altos or places that Steve Jobs lived, but it was still a pretty affluent part of town. And what was interesting is that the people that we tell ourselves that we want to be like, they live there. And I had the opportunity to meet their kids and date their daughters. I probably shouldn't say that, I know, but it's 30 years ago. And, again, I'm just speaking facts. And I had enough peace of mind, or conscience, or I don't know what the word is, but I was smart enough to know that if these people that are movers and shakers in Silicon Valley are changing the world and creating things we never thought possible, and they see something in me, then let me take a chance and listen to that, and at least believe in myself, because I don't know that I always had the courage to. When you live your life in some of these communities, you hear a lot of people naysaying. I had people in my family that were naysayers. I had friends of mine that when I told them I wanted to do something, they were naysayers. And so it really took confidence for me to stick to what I did. And growing up, my parents really forced me to be an individual. And I appreciate that about them, because their big thing was, and I think a lot of it was out of economic necessity, because they knew that in order for me to try to be one of the quote unquote cool kids, it was going to cost me money I didn't have. And if I spent money I didn't have, then I'd go into debt. And if I went into debt, then even if I did have all this promise and potential and opportunity, I wouldn't be able to maximize on it, because I'd be crawling myself out from under the rock, which at one point I actually did find myself in a pretty significant financial hole, but I was able to climb myself up. And, not being one of the cool kids, it took me out of a lot of social circles. I wasn't, I didn't find myself relying on others. I just didn't, I grew up not really feeling as though I can really count on anybody. And there's a lot behind that. Some of it probably goes to being an adopted kid, and some of that goes to growing up in the hood, and some of that is just the people that you're around and their own perspective. And I got into the habit of never using what others do as a measure of my success. Look, I have friends that had some cool cars. I have friends that had good clothes. And to this day, if you met anybody that I know that had a cool car, they'll say, hey, Sabado asked the same question. Can you give me a ride in your car? I didn't say because I was driving a beat up Honda and you were driving a BMW that I wasn't successful. I just wasn't doing what you were doing. And if I wanted to do that, then it was a goal for me to do that. But I never got into the habit of measuring my success based on other people's accomplishments or what other people did. And I look at the world for what it is, not for what I want it to be. And that really built a strong sense of accountability. And I hold myself to a higher standard than just about anybody else I know. In fact, sometimes when I have challenges socially and I get aggravated, and I know we all get aggravated. So if you don't get aggravated, tell me in the comments that you don't get aggravated. But we all get aggravated. But it's because I hold myself to such a high standard. Because I had so many people tell me what I couldn't do, I held myself to such a high standard that other people, they just don't hold themselves to that standard. They don't have that kind of accountability. But part of that high level of accountability is looking at the world for what it is as opposed to what you want it to be. And sometimes the problem was me. Sometimes it was my own mindset. Sometimes it was the way that I was moving that was disrupting a situation. And I could try to deflect that and make it everybody else's problem. But at the end of the day, I got to live with myself. And if I know that's a problem, then I got to do something about it. I mean, it's just the way that it goes. And I got into the habit really early of not asking for permission from others to pursue my dreams. I'll tell you a funny story. So I think I've mentioned I'm in this Master Gardener program, and I'm working on creating an outreach program or project to get out and teach gardening to disenfranchised communities, because the reality is most of the folks in that program want to go to the rich white areas because they got a nice garden and it's safe and it's comfortable, but they don't want to go to the place that they hear about on the news. I mean, I just call it what it is, and I know they're going to say, oh, I'm not racist. Well, whatever. If you tell me in the comments that you're not racist, then that tells me that you're probably in question. So again, today's just the shirt names it all. Today, it is what it is. And so they don't want to go up there. The project coordinator told me in the orientation that people didn't want to go south of the river because those are the disenfranchised neighborhoods. Well, I started asking other people in the class that said they were interested. And what started to happen soon after that was the project started going down this path where it started to get really complicated. And it got complicated because everybody had these ideas that really took us off the path. And it reminded me of my days in human resources when somebody didn't want to do something. When people didn't want to do something, most people don't have the courage to just say, no, I don't want to do it. So what they do is they convolute it with a lot of bureaucracy. I call it bullshit, but a lot of bureaucracy in order not to do it. So then it gets so complicated that people forget about it and it never happens. And I realized at that moment that my dream of trying to uplift a community and uplift the world by providing an opportunity for people in the community to do something that maybe they want to do, didn't feel like they had the opportunity to do, that was something that people want to attach themselves to it, but they don't necessarily want to do the work. And so I changed around how I was going after it, and I'm going after it. And I have meetings set up for next week where we're going to talk about some things with some executive directors and get the ball rolling. But, I realized that at that point, by default, I was asking for permission from others on how to do that. And that's something that I just never did in the past. And I did it because I thought it was the right thing to do, but I don't know that it necessarily was. And so I don't do that anymore. But what that's really led to, this whole kind of framework is it's led to me being in a position where I define my purpose. I've mentioned before, and I'll mention it again, and I'll mention it to the day that I die. And I don't know whether I'm successful or not. There are some people that have told me that I've changed their lives, and there's other people I'm sure they don't like me, and I don't like them either. So, again, it goes back to where we're at. This is where we're at today. But my personal mission statement and my purpose in everything I do is to uplift the human condition in any way that I can. And that helps all people. I tend to focus on people that look like me because, again, it incenses me that we represent 15-20% of the population, but 80% of the jail population, 80% of whatever the negative statistic is, that more of my people are dying than anybody else. So that bothers me. But the reality is, you go into a disenfranchised neighborhood like the one I grew up in, you got Filipino people, you got white people, you got Asian people, you got all kinds of different types of people. So at the end of the day, I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm just focused on the problems of one segment of one community, because I think that's wrong too, because I think our world is more complex than that. But it's really to uplift the entire human condition. And if one kid, as an example, goes out and gardens, that person may start a farm that then feeds millions and millions of people, and they may have gotten the inspiration from something they saw when I was helping them. That's the way I look at the world. Now, I don't have this grandiose idea that I'm Gandhi or I'm Martin Luther King or I'm any of those people, but I do try to move with purpose and conviction 100% of the time. Any of my friends will tell you that. They'll say, Saab, one of the challenges you have sometimes is that you're so anchored in fact. And it is because people, particularly in this political climate, there's a lot of BS out there. And there's a lot of people that are doing confirmation bias, and there's just a lot of really bad information. And so I have a tendency to review primary sources. When I was in human resources working in hospitals, we had the Joint Commission. And one of the things we always talked about was primary source verification. A lot of people don't know what the Constitution says. In fact, my wife and I bought like 20 copies of the Constitution. So if somebody gave us some bullshit, we say, here's what the Constitution says. Read it and then tell me what it says, because you can't fight with that. You get the religious folks that tell you that religious things are, you're supposed to do this, that, and the other. Say, well, where does it say that in the Bible? Or is that an interpretation? And if you're interpreting it that way, now we can have a conversation because we're dealing with your opinion. But it all sits on my purpose. So again, I'll step off of my soapbox, but that's just how passionate I am about trying to uplift the human condition. And it's not just me, it's helping other people do the same thing and so on. So the other thing that it led to me, setting boundaries with my friends and my family. One of the things that anybody that knows me knows, that if we're cool, we're cool. I'm going to be generous. I'm gonna be generous with my time. I'll be generous with my resources. I'm Johnny on the spot. I'm always on time. I'm not gonna be late. I'm gonna respect you. But if I get a sense that there's a little bit of something that isn't right, or there's something that you're trying to play me, you might get me once. First time, shame on me. Second time, shame on you. But then I cut that relationship off and move forward. If I don't feel like I'm being supported by certain family members, then I'm not going to put myself in positions where I'm going to need that support. And it's not because I'm trying to be almighty or that I'm incredibly needy, because I'm not. But I just set those boundaries because when you look at what happens to a lot of people, a lot of times it's people in their own family that cause their demise. And I just don't want to be that person. But it allowed me to look at things for what they are as opposed to what I want them to be. And so people that are around me because of something they think they can get, if it's a mutually beneficial situation, great. If it's not, I'm out. That easy. And the other thing, and I talked a little bit about it, is that it led to me holding myself accountable. I hold myself to an incredibly high standard. It's funny because in the Master Gardener class, so I talk about always being on time. And so the last day, I'm usually about 30 minutes early. My on time is about 30 minutes early. And so I was always 30 minutes early to each class. While they're setting up, I'm sitting in the chair, helping them set up or whatever the case was. And then the last day, I got hit with this crazy traffic. And I sat in the front of the class every time because I knew that in order for me to pay attention, I had to be in the front of the class. And so people would come and they'd sit in the front so we could kind of get to know each other and stuff like that. So the last day, I show up right when the class is starting. And it was funny because the teacher said, okay, now we can get started because we're here, because you're here because I thought something was going on and we were concerned about you. And it was almost like the whole class, because I'm the biggest dude in the class, but I sit in the front of the room. I've been doing that since college, and people that knew me in college, they laugh because they know that's just how I move, because I'm not going to waste my time doing something and doing it half-assed. If I'm, as they say, if you're going to be a monkey, be a gorilla. I know that's a bad look for me to say, but that's from my man Redman, and Redman is just super dope, the Funk Dr. Spock. So anyway, back on point. And then, the other thing I don't do is I've learned, because I'm an individual and I'm able to look at things individually. I'm able to look at things and take advice from all sources. I don't limit myself from good sources. In this political climate, there's a lot of people that get caught into the emotional position. And so if you're a Democrat and a Republican says something, no matter what it is, it can't be right in the format that they're saying. If you're a Republican and a Democrat says something, then it's almost impossible to say that's right. And it's gotten so divided. And I think people have been that way for a long time. But I think now people are just emboldened because of the guy we have in office, which I think is a horrible tragedy for the country. And again, I'm not getting political on that, but I've always voted. I started off when I was in college. I started off voting nonpartisan because I saw the bullshit on both sides. And because at that time, everybody was having the same conversation. They just had different ways to get to it. At least when I was in college, that was the way I interpreted it. Then I got to, on some of the issues, not on all the issues. I just want to be clear. But then it got to the point where I started voting Democrat because I thought that, when it comes to things like healthcare, education, domestic issues, things that are affecting people that look like me and people in the communities that I've lived in a decent way, it seemed like they aligned with where I was. And, since then I've moved more towards independent because I can't be tied to, you're not going to put me on any bandwagon and move me in any direction. I'm going to make a decision based on the primary source information. And if I make a decision and it's wrong, or I have an assertion and it's wrong, or I think something and it's wrong, then you can chin check me. When I had my video about tariffs, there was a guy that says, well, the tariffs haven't even come into effect yet. And you're saying, I said, no, I'm not saying that the prices are raised because of tariffs. I said that, and you could go back and you could look at that video and see what I said. And I basically said that, look, I'm just saying this is the impact that they have in our society because somebody's got to pay the cost. And at the end of the day, I don't care who you are. If you sell donuts, if the cost of sugar goes up, guess who's paying more for those donuts? You are as a consumer. It's that simple. I don't care if you're a Democrat. I don't care if you're a Republican. I don't care if you're a Libertarian. I don't care what you are. The fact is, that's how business is run. So if you want to look at how business is run, then that's how business is run. But anyway, as I think about where I got advice, some of the best life-changing advice that I use to this day when I'm in conversations is the advice that I got from John, the homeless guy, who basically told me when I was in college, charging hard, don't take yourself too serious because you might end up as a paranoid schizophrenic like me after he had a nervous breakdown when he was a senior at the same school that I went to. So, most people are like, I'm not going to talk to this person because this person's homeless. I'm like, this dude's got some serious game, because as I looked around, I saw people that were having a bunch of problems. And, the goal for me was, walking around the planet Earth, making money, having fun. And so I was able to do that. And so, taking all of this into account now, what they say, how you like me now? Now I'm retired. I'm 53 years old now. I'm turning 54 this year. I'm retired. I don't go to work every day. I just got back from the grocery store and it's the middle of the afternoon. I do what I want to do when I want to do it. And sometimes there's days that I don't do anything at all. I went to the ball game last night and had a couple beers, and then I was able to wake up a little later today. It's just that's the life that I lead. And I'm mentally, I'm in a better place than I've ever been. Physically, I'm in probably the best place I've ever been. And I'm in a position now where I could take this time to just help share that with you. I'm not saying that I'm better than anybody. I'm not saying anybody's better than me. That's always been one of my philosophies. I'm not better than anybody, but nobody's better than me. And at the end of the day, that's how we're all going to move. And if you think you are, then that's a problem you're going to have to overcome. And same for me. But that advice, by not limiting my ability to take advice from a bunch of different sources, I've been able to really glean what the world is. In fact, when you look at the Buddhists, people will tell you that Buddhism isn't a religion. Buddhism is a way of life, because what the Buddha was seeking was enlightenment, not right or wrong, but looking at the world and understanding how the connectivity of everything in the world and how everything is connected to everything else. So it's kind of the same thing, but you have to be open to getting information from a lot of different sources, which is what I did. So anyway, so now I'm retired and I'm sharing this information with you. I also am in a place where my primary focus, I woke up this morning and the first conversation I had was about something that dealt with the Master Gardener program as we get out to the communities and we start talking. I don't have a job. I have a passion. I have a life. I'm running a business in my life. And the fact that I could wake up and the first thing I think about is bringing the ability to grow your own food to underserved communities. I mean, what more can you ask for? And again, some of you aren't into gardening, so I get that. But if you think about what it is that you would be doing right now, if you're at work right now, ask yourself, what would you be doing right now if you weren't working? And being in a place where you can do that. And it's because of, not in spite of, everything that I mentioned earlier. And the last, and I think probably the most important piece of it is, I'm able to inspire others with my story. Look, I'm not perfect, and I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, and I've done a lot of stupid shit. Excuse my language, but I've done a lot of stupid stuff. And if I look back, are there things that I would have done different? 100% of the time. Unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of examples of people that I could follow to say, this is what I need to do, or here's a way to think about it, here's something more to investigate or to learn about. So that's one of the reasons that I'm here. I don't have, a lot of times you get in these mentor-mentee relationships, and the mentee wants something different because they want something quick and fast, or Dr. X's magic elixir. But at the end of the day, it's slow and steady that really wins the race. So I just try to inspire, the fact that I'm able to wake up and at least once a week inspire some of you with the strength of my story, because I have the ability to take time to tell it. I think it's phenomenal. And that's what my life is. There's not a lot, I could talk about going golf and I can talk about going fishing, but none of that is important as my drive and my passion to uplift the human condition in any way that I can. In fact, my wife will tell me sometimes when I'm at this grocery store, or I'm at the gas station, or I'm somewhere and somebody does something stupid, I'll say I want to punch them in the throat. And my wife will say, well, if you do that, how's that uplifting the human condition? So it really drives everything that I do. I tell you this to say that and this is going to sound kind of harsh, but it's true, is that, I empathize with the struggles that people have. And again, I may have had some opportunities, I may have had some faculties, I may have had some interactions or some exposures that other people hadn't had that helped me to get to where it is that I am. And I'm extremely proud, and might I say humbled by it. And it really drives me to do this. But what I don't do is I don't feel sorry for you. If you, we all had, to some degree, we all had a hard lease on life. Chris Rock said one time, he said, he said he was talking to a white waiter, and that waiter said he wouldn't want to be him, and he's rich. And I think he's right. Because at the end of the day, I still go out on the street and worry about getting pulled over by the police. I still have conversations with my friends about that time that police officer pulled us out of the car at gunpoint for no reason. I still have to tell people about the time that we went to 7-Eleven to get some guava nectar juice, and then 6 police cars came up with their guns pulled and pulled us out of 7-Eleven and searched us over something that was bogus. There's the list goes on. So I still have to deal with that. So we all have those struggles. We all have those things. I still remember being a kid and I had Portuguese neighbors, and instead of calling a doorbell dish, they'd call it nigger knocking. I had to internalize those types of things. So, we all have certain struggles that we had to go through. But the key isn't that you had those struggles, because we all have them. And, I could talk about my struggles as an African-American man, but look at women. Women have had struggles over history. Women were considered property for a long time. Women, in a lot of cases, and again, you can check me on my facts, but no-fault divorce wasn't codified in the law until the 70s. And so women were in relationships that they couldn't get out of, because if the man didn't want to divorce them legally, they weren't able to divorce them until about the early 1970s. So women essentially were property because they couldn't do it. So my point is that we all have had some struggles, but like Heavy D said, now that you found love, what are you going to do with it? And, and if you succumb to those excuses, all you're really saying is that the negativity wins. If you ever saw the movie Do the Right Thing, there was a guy named Radio Raheem. He had the 2 rings, love and hate. And he said that, where hate looks like it's going to knock down love, then love comes back and gets hate with an uppercut, and love wins the day every day. Well, you don't want to let that negativity win, because if you just say, well, my circumstances are such, so I could never do then you find yourself in a spot where negativity wins and you've given up. And I'm not saying that we're always going to overcome that, but if we just lay on our back and let it happen, then we're as much of the problem as the stuff that's happening to us. I know it's not a popular way of looking at it, but I'm not here to be popular. I'm here to lace you up with some GAME. So, the thing you always want to remember is that slow and steady wins the race. And and considering we're talking about things around early retirement, I wanted to just leave you with this last factoid that I think will kind of help bring it all together in terms of that slow and steady wins the race. So if you look at S&P averages, and the S&P, I was reading something today or watching something today, and it was talking about since the inception of the S&P 500, it's been about it's the average return, and it's been higher or lower, it's about 11.2%, something like that. So I started to kind of mess around with some numbers and do some other research. And one of the things that I realized is that, if you took $10,000 today and you invested it, you would get on a $10,000 investment, on average, about a profit of $1,000 per year. But then when you do, and just know that the first $100,000 that you save, and again, this can be in your 401ks, this could be in your 403bs, this could be you get inheritance, this could be you cutting out crap and not going out to buy the Maserati because you live at your mama house, all of those types of things. You get rid of wherever you find it. In my last video, and I suggest each of you go back and watch it, is how selling my RV and changing my cell phone service is going to make me $600,000 over the next 20 years. So my point being is if you could muster about $834 a month, which I know is a lot of money, but again, take a look at what you're spending. Is it, if you're in a situation where you just need to you're just barely surviving, then this isn't necessarily going to work for you. The numbers might be smaller, but if you're like most people, you got $800, you drive a car and you got car payments that are $1,000 a month. You don't need a car payment with $1,000 a month payment. And if you do, have your business pay for it, have somebody else, have your job pay for it. But most of us can deal with some little car. But anyway, I'm not here to tell people what to do. But if you take $833 a month, then that'll give you $10,000 a year. Now, when you get up to $100,000, and this is why I say it becomes more difficult, the first $100,000 is the most difficult. But when you get to that $100,000, that's going to give you on average about a profit of about $10,000 a year. So think about that. If you get to $100,000 and then and you say over 20 years, you just have that $100,000 without dividends that are going into it, without interest, because again, all of this is you get interest on the interest. Over 20 years, that $100,000 just in its base, without anything else, without taking into account the interest, because you get interest on the interest. So again, that's that compounding. And if you want a video on compound interest, let me know and I'll try to pull some stuff together for you. But that's $200,000. So you take $100,000, you end up in 20 years with $300,000. I mean, that's now, and then when you get up to $500,000 a year, see, it all steps up, is that you're making an average profit of about $50,000 a year. So I just want to leave you with those numbers because as unrealistic as it sounds, I got divorced in the 2010s. And I was able to, I started basically with nothing, and I was able to save and save and save. And so here I am now. I'm retired. My point being is that we all have setbacks and there's things that happen. And, it's like Jay-Z says, allow me to reintroduce myself. And I think you have the opportunity to do that, probably more so than you do. And if you ever have any questions or anything, I don't charge people for consultations. I'm not that guy. I'm not trying to sell you something. This is me just trying to help you by lacing you up with some game, some information that may, help you get to a place where it is that you want to be, whether it's retired or living your best life. Because remember, it's never my expectation that you retire early, but it is my expectation that you live your best life. So on that note, get to work. The sooner the better. If you start earlier, then you're going to get the fruits of your labor later. On that note, I'm going to go ahead and cut this off. Have a good rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon.